Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sara, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well. Today, you'll meet Michael Escobar. Michael and I used to volunteer together for an educational nonprofit. I always found conversations with Michael to be very enlightening. He's one of those people who just knows a lot about a lot. Michael is genuinely curious, and he seeks answers and combines knowledge in these fun and interesting ways. And on this episode, you'll see how this skill informs the way that he navigates life. Michael and I talk about the education system and whether it prepares us for professional life. We talk about how he reconnected with his roots through his major at UC Berkeley, what led him to a career in international shipping, and then insurance and renewable energy. I think Michael has such an interesting story and a great perspective to share. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Michael Escobar. Michael, you and I volunteered for Minds Matter San Francisco together, and you were a senior class lead the year that we volunteered together.
Yes.
Yes, and that's how we know each other. And we reconnected when I was thinking about doing this podcast because I'm actually really interested in your career, your education, your perspective on education. We've talked about this, and I think you have a unique perspective on how we get prepared to be in our roles in our career, how we get on the track to a certain career. So, welcome. Let's start here. Let's start with you telling us a little bit about who you are, who is Michael, what has your career journey been like?
Well, thank you. It's some of my favorite words in the English language are, Michael, please tell me about yourself. So, it's true. I take education very seriously. I've never been an education professional, but I have taught people and I've tutored people. I'm a product of California public schools my whole life, and I've seen people thrive. I myself throve in the system, and I've definitely seen people for whom the system didn't work. You know, some of my friends from high school didn't graduate high school, just would not do it. You know, the school made every effort to get them over the line so that they could walk the stage, and they just said, no, not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, systems only have a certain amount of efficiency. They don't work for everybody. And that's definitely part of the challenge with education. And then after education, everybody is in the same workplace. And when I was in high school, I was a member of the academic decathlon competition. So the school fields 9 students, and they compete against kids from other schools. And the decathlon is 10 events, so kids have to demonstrate expertise or strength in everything from speech and interview to writing an essay to some academic subject matters, from math to science to English literature to art history, music history. And so I got a lot out of that. One of the coolest things about the academic decathlon is that it requires schools to send out a team made up of kids with different GPAs. So you have 3 students with A GPAs, you know, above 3 point something, 3 kids with GPAs above B, and 3 kids with GPAs above C, or actually maybe the other way around. So there's a cutoff for kids with B GPAs. Then kids with A GPAs, obviously it could be above 4 because they have AP classes. And then there's 3 students on the team have to have GPAs no higher than maybe 2.5. So really C or below. And there have been kids on decathlon teams with D or F grade points. When I was a student, the joke was the kids in our team who are C's are going to be CEOs one day. And the kids in our team who are A students will be working for them. And nobody knew what the B students were, but I was a B student. So I said, B students work for the government. And it's ironic that eventually my career did take me into public transportation. So I did actually work for the government for 6 years. But the thing with these different grade points is that there are different personality types. So what's great about decathlon was that it forced us as student competitors to learn how to work together when people had very different learning styles, very different strategies for meeting deadlines and things like that. So that was really formative to me. I know that one of the topics we're going to talk about today is decision making, and that obviously relies partly on your individual expertise, your subject matter mastery, and there's more to it than that. It's not just the data that you have on command in your head. Also, nowadays, what we know in our heads is complemented by what we can easily search on Google. That's a whole other domain of knowledge. And different people have different levels of Google skills. But in addition to that, there's an X factor, intuition, judgment, that plays a big role. So school, at best, is equipping you not just with subject matter knowledge, which I think is sort of the least important thing, but more importantly, teaching you how to learn. How can you educate yourself after you leave school? Ideally, you should be a lifelong learner. I think that's really important. And then, the holy grail, I guess, is, can you actually learn how to make good decisions? And different people have different styles. I know that you're a human resources professional, and so you know all about the Myers-Briggs test. I've tested on that. It's been a long time. I've tested as an INFJ and as an INFT. And you knowing me a little bit, maybe those scores make sense to you. I kind of don't really know what they mean. But I do know that I'm an introvert. And I also know that when different personality tests over the years, different employment, aptitude tests have helped me learn that I'm ultimately a person who feels my way to the right decision. But I think that feeling is guided by my subject matter knowledge. So professionally, if I'm doing something in risk management or insurance, where there's a lot of gray areas, maybe surprisingly, my decision of what feels right is going to be guided in part by subject matter knowledge, data, past experience. And then also, there's a lot of other things, a lot of other factors that play into that we can talk about later.
So tell us a little bit about your journey, starting with your education. And so after decathlon, after high school, what did you do? Where did you go? How did you end up studying what you studied? And then how did you end up in your first job?
So my first job was at the age of 15. So I was practicing the sport of fencing at a fencing club in Burbank, California. And over the summer, they had jobs going to teach fencing to little kids at birthday parties. So for 2 summers, I taught fencing to kids at birthday parties, ages like 6 to 10, and that was my first experience as a teacher, I guess. Later on, I worked for my parents. So my parents had, for about 30 years, a small international shipping freight forwarding business. So I did a bunch of jobs for them over the years. I built the company's first website back in the late 90s, and then I did other courier admin jobs for them. And I came back to them after college as well, briefly. In high school, I always thought that I would be an English major. I'm very verbal. That's one of my strengths. And so it sort of seemed natural to me that I'd wind up as a journalist. My mom got me the autobiography of Walter Cronkite for Christmas one year, and I read it. I was fascinated. I think about that book a lot. And there was a certain kind of macho mystique to the trench coat wearing, kind of, cultivating sources, underground, sources for news stories, and doing meetings in parking lots at 2 a.m. and, microfilm pickups from the park and things like that. I was attracted to that mystique of the journalist. And there's this great movie, Reds, with Warren Beatty, about this journalist, John Reed, who reported on the Russian Revolution. And so he wrote the book 10 Days That Shook the World. So Reds is about that guy, living in a walk-up apartment in Greenwich Village and, living the bohemian intellectual life, writing for newspapers. Like, nothing could be cooler than that. And in college, I went to community college after high school because I was not ready to go away from home at 18. I never would have admitted that when I was 18 years old, but I definitely was semi-deliberately 3 weeks late with my financial aid applications. And I just thought I was so brilliant that all the colleges where I had applied would just roll out the red carpet for me anyway. And I didn't apply to any UCs. I only applied to expensive liberal arts colleges that my parents could never have afforded to send me to. And so I was accepted at a few places. They gave me no dollars of financial aid because my applications were late. So it was, very crestfallen that in the fall of 1998, I started at my local community college. And a couple of my friends went to Harvard. One of my friends went to Yale. Several went to UCLA. and other prestigious places. Meanwhile, Michael went to Pasadena City College.
I went to Ohlone Community College for 2 years. I thought it was a great experience.
Yeah.
I'm very, very glad that I had the community college experience. I teach at Laney College in Oakland now, and I think community college is a really good stepping stone. I remember the reason why I went was I came back from Pakistan. I spent 2 years in Pakistan in high school, and when I came back, I was like, okay, I have to figure out, I was already a senior, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out college applications. That was really hard.
Yeah.
And so instead of doing that, when my photography teacher was like, you should just go to community college and then apply to other UCs, CSUs from there. And I thought that was a great idea. I think community colleges were great.
Yeah, so I came at Christmas. All of my friends who'd gone away for school came back for Christmas, and I saw them at the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf in downtown Burbank. And so many of them were depressed or stressed out. And a lot of them felt like they were just a number, or they were, they had the typical freshman shock of going to an elite university and finding that, hey, you're no longer the smartest person in the room. The level of competition is so much higher. And meanwhile, I was in these great classes. I had no class larger than 90. Most of my classes were about 30 or smaller. And none of my professors were expected to publish. Mm-hmm. They were only there to teach. And I had phenomenal teachers. I had amazing community college experience. All the teachers just really cared, really understood what it took to get a person to understand material. I was very strong in English and social sciences, and I was super weak in math in high school. I took remedial classes at PCC and never mastered calculus, but did everything that I needed to do in order to transfer to university as a junior. And so I'm super grateful for that. And it cost me in the late 90s and early 2000s $11 a unit. So you could change your major as much as you wanted because it didn't matter financially. You could afford to explore. You could learn for the sake of learning.
Right.
And
that's the other thing I loved about community college was I was taking all these classes. I think I took the history of rock and roll.
Amazing.
Yeah, but I'm not someone that would, I don't think anybody who knows me would be like, oh yeah, Sara's definitely the type of person that would take the history of rock and roll. But I thought it was really cool. I think about that and I'm like, if I had to pay a lot of money for that course, would I actually take it? I don't think so.
Or if you were pressed for time because you're going to Princeton and you're waiting to get interviewed for your Wall Street job, and every year is $100,000, and you need to take all the other courses that the Lehman Brothers expects you to have. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
So after an amazing experience at PCC, I wound up at Berkeley. And, I applied to some of the private schools that I had applied to before, and I also applied at a bunch of UCs. And very happy with that decision, not only because Berkeley is so great, but also because it's an hour's flight from LA. So I could see my parents anytime I wanted to, but I didn't have to see them if I didn't want to see them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so close that I could just go home every weekend with dirty laundry to wash at mom's house. I had to be somewhat autonomous. So that was great. And I was old enough by then that I was able to have a complete, financial aid package with no contribution from my parents. That was very nice. And then in the fall of 2003, I started a blog on LiveJournal. And one of my most regular readers was my dad. And so after I'd been in school for a month, he said, hey, would it be okay if we sent you $100 a month just so you have it, because we want to support you? I didn't need it because I already had all my budget taken care of with financial aid. And I was also working 10 hours a week in work study. I said, sure. So my dad's $100 a month was my beer money when I was a 23-year-old undergrad.
That's great.
So in the course of jumping through majors at PCC, I had never, I don't know if this was your experience as a first-generation American, but in my house, we didn't speak any Spanish. We spoke only English. I think my generation, the parents really wanted us to fit in and have the greatest chances of success, which means being able to speak English without an accent. At least back then, it's what it meant. And I think that's still kind of true today. So I grew up speaking only English. In fact, at a certain point, my dad and my grandmother tried to teach me a little bit of Spanish, and I resisted when I was 11 years old, 13 years old. There was nothing I wanted less than any reminder that I didn't belong. And so I never took Spanish. In the in the exploration at PCC, I came to the realization that I am in so many ways a carbon copy of my dad, who grew up in Colombia. And so I realized, okay, if I want to understand myself, I have to understand him. And so in order to understand my dad, I've got to understand the place where he came from, where he lived until he was 13, and where he still was deeply connected with a gigantic family. I don't know how it is in Pakistan, but in the 1950s in Colombia, everybody had 5 or 10 siblings. So just the gigantic network of first cousins was tremendous. So I took a semester of Spanish, fell in love with it. Took a semester of Latin American history, fell in love with it. And I had also acquired this big political ideology, progressive, left-wing, socially committed ideology. And so as an idealistic college student, I thought, well, if I want to do human rights and economic development, public policy, advocacy stuff, then Latin America would be a good domain for that because I've got a personal connection there. So I majored in Latin American studies at Cal, and if I had it to do over again, I would pick a different major because I think it was kind of trendy in the 90s to make your own major, and interdisciplinary studies was kind of a fad in academia. So Cal did well by me. I was able to take a lot of great classes. There was a Latin American Studies major, which, as undergrad majors go, it was well put together. It required you to take a certain amount of breadth, and it gave you the opportunity to go reasonably in-depth as an undergrad. I regret not doing a thesis, but instead of doing a thesis, I went overseas. So I had a semester in Chile, which for an international major makes really good sense. And I think even if you're majoring in English, do a semester in London. That's what my girlfriend did. And so, that international experience, I think in today's age, is vital for anything. And as a person, I think it broadens you a lot by just understanding that life is different in other countries. So I did not do an honors thesis as an undergrad. And I did have these ideas of going into nonprofits, international organizations. But when I graduated, I felt a very strong sense of obligation to help out my parents. And that, they've been supporting me all this time. They have their small shipping company. I should go to work for them. And it's interesting to explore the path not traveled, because in my final semester in Chile, I had an amazing class with a professor of 20th century Latin American history, and he, at that time it was a socialist government in Chile, he was also a part-time advisor to the government. And he said, Michael, if you want to stay in Chile, I might have a job for you. And it was so tempting. And I told him, thank you very much, but I've got to go back and work for my parents. And
do you regret that?
I do.
Yeah.
But you never know. You make the best decisions you can with the information you have at the time, and you don't know what the outcome is going to be of either of the multiple forks in the road that you take. So you're always making decisions under what they call the fog of war. So anyway, I came home, and I lasted about 3 months in the family business. They say that you can't quit when you work for family, but I did. So
Very good. Good for
I
you.
quit working for the family business in order to preserve the family relationship. It just didn't work out. And so now, needing desperately to get out of my parents' house, I sent out 80 resumes to different employers, applied to different jobs. And I discovered that in the human rights, economic development, public policy, advocacy world, there's lots of jobs for unpaid interns in New York and Washington, D.C., and there are some occasional jobs as program directors for which you need a master's degree. And for someone like me, who not only did I not have a master's, but I didn't even have any internships. That's another thing I should have done as an undergrad. I wasn't competitive for any of these jobs. So I applied for any job at all from a temp agency in Southern California. They placed me as the temp front desk receptionist for an insurance company in downtown Los Angeles. And that's how my insurance career started. So as anybody who works in the insurance industry will confirm, people get into that industry by accident. But if you ever looked at the newspaper, back when newspapers existed, you looked through the job section, the help wanted section of a newspaper, there would always be a million insurance jobs. So there is quite a lot of turnover. That's the reason why there's so many openings. The lower level service positions in the insurance industry, there's a lot of turnover. But the insurance company that hired me liked me enough to hire me away permanently from the temp agency. And then they liked me enough to give me a trainee position as an underwriter in the office in San Francisco, which is how I came here. So December 2007, I moved to San Francisco. and became an underwriter in the marine insurance world. And so people always ask me, is an underwriter like an actuary? And so what I say is, imagine an insurance company is like a prehistoric village. The underwriters are the hunters, and the actuaries are the priests. So the underwriters are salespeople, and they're cultivating relationships with insurance brokers. I was in the commercial insurance world, so I'm not selling life insurance, not selling health insurance, not selling homeowners insurance, but I was selling cargo insurance for importer-exporters, very much like my parents' business. And I was selling insurance for hull, property coverage for boats and ships, and liability insurance for boat and ship operators, and different things like that. And also construction. So I sold a lot of insurance for construction equipment. I insured the construction equipment that was used in the excavation of the Chinatown subway tunnel in downtown San Francisco. And I insured the construction of a mid-rise hotel tower in Manhattan. And I insured the renovation of San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. So that was really cool. That job taught me a lot about kind of a systematic, technical underwriting of risk, appraisal, understanding of risk. An underwriter for an insurance company is like the loan officer of a bank. So, receiving the applications, deciding, do I want to quote this risk? If I want the risk, how much do I want to charge for it? There's actually quite a lot of levers you can pull to manipulate or to manage risk as an insurance company. So I got very deep in how the sausage of insurance is made. And then I was approached for an opportunity to be risk manager at a solar construction company. So for a year, I was the risk manager at Belectric, which was the American subsidiary of a big German solar installer. And I had the nicest ever business trip, which was I did the job site safety inspection for the construction project they had going in Puerto Rico.
Nice. I love travel perks.
Big perk.
You've mentioned to me that you're pretty conservative when it comes to risk-taking. I'd love to hear a little bit about what went into your decisions about your major and your first job. What were the things that were top of mind for you when you were thinking about these moments in the way that you built your career?
That's a great question. So the first thing that occurs to me is something that Teddy Roosevelt once said. So you should do what you can with what you have where you are. And I think when we were talking on the phone, I mentioned being comfortable with ambiguity. I was once briefly a candidate for a job at a big tech company, and that was one of the attributes that they said was a strength to work there. So you can never know everything. You're always making decisions under the fog of war. So the fog of war is something that comes from military history. Imagine if you're playing a game of chess with somebody at the table, but you can't see the pieces that the other person has. You don't know how many pieces they have or where exactly they are, and you even have an imperfect ability to control your own pieces, and you don't know what's going to happen. If you send a piece over here, what's going to happen, and what the other side's going to be doing at the same time, and as a result of what you're doing, that's the fog of war. So you're making decisions with a baseline of uncertainty. And so I think a lot of my decisions wind up being based on feeling, what feels right. And that's based on some subject matter knowledge. For a long time in my career, I was the youngest person in the room. I'm in my 40s now, so I'm now kind of in the middle. But especially as a young person trying to break into the insurance business, it's very difficult to do that, especially when all the clients are much older than you. So, for anybody watching this who's considering a career in sales, definitely find out what you can about what the job actually is like, who the clients are, how is it that you get the deals done, because if you're trying to pose as a trusted advisor to somebody, but they've got 30 years more of experience in the field than you do, that it might be hard for you to win credibility as a trusted advisor. So you asked what goes into my decisions, and I mentioned to you that personally I'm relatively conservative in my risk-taking. I'm not a gambler. I don't waste money in the casinos when I go to Las Vegas. I try to think about what are the realistic, likely outcomes of my decision. And that's always a judgment call, because you only have limited ability to predict the future. And So with my limited life experience, I decided, okay, I think it makes sense to move in with my girlfriend. I think it makes sense to apply for this job, and once they give it to me, to quit my existing job, because it makes sense, and on balance, I think I'll probably be fine. I think it makes sense to move from Los Angeles to San Francisco because this opportunity is really good. And, so it's like cost and benefit. Like moving to San Francisco, I'll still be just an hour away from my family. And so the benefits are very strong, the costs, it's not really a meticulous arithmetical decision because, you can't really boil these things down to numbers. It's not like an investment company deciding whether or not to acquire an investment target.
Right.
But, it's a qualitative as well. It's a fundamentally qualitative process for me. And, a lot of the times I'm making decisions about highly technical matters where I do have professional knowledge in insurance and risk management. And so, sometimes I do have the ability to tell the people I'm working with, this is my professional recommendation based on the expertise of my expert opinion. Sometimes, like, do I or do I not buy a house? That's more, does it make sense? Like, I can project, there's many websites where you can see, does it make sense to rent? If your rent is X and if the purchase price of the house is Y, and if you plan to be there for 15 years, does the decision pan out? You can get a technical quantitative answer to that question. And that decision only goes so far because I'm buying a house with a partner, my life partner, and how do I feel about my life partner? Definitely buying a house together is a significant decision and kind of a validation of the relationship. It's a stress test of the relationship. So, at every one of these junctures, it's always been a question of what do I know? What do I think is likely to happen? What feels right? Am I the kind of person that wants to own a house? That's a big hurdle to jump over.
Oh, I think so many times we overlook that. We get into this mode of, okay, well, this seems like the next thing for me to do, and this seems like the next step, and we forget to check in with ourselves and go, is this something I actually want? Matthew McConaughey wrote Green Lights. Have you read it? I actually really like him as an author. And in his book, he wrote about, it was a situation where he was somewhere else. He was in another country, and he was really excited because he got someone every day to like iron his jeans. And so he tells his friend that, oh, I get someone to iron my denim. And his friend goes, well, that's great if that's something you want.
Right.
And he does a way better job talking the way that he explains this. But he talks about how, you have to pause and think about, is this something that I want? Before you just go with it. And it made him pause and go, is this something that I actually want? So I think what you just said is so relevant. Am I the type of person that wants to own a house? And I think we forget to do that.
Yeah. So a lot of the time, people will get caught up in thinking about whether they can do something, and they don't think about whether they should do something. So that's very important. I think, one of the questions for today was, how has my education prepared me for my career?
Yes. Tell us how your education has prepared you for your career.
So I can't say enough good things about academic decathlon. And what the relevance of that is in high school, I got an experience that was like a classical liberal arts education. So I think very highly of my friends that have STEM degrees, but for me, the liberal arts was a perfect fit. And what I love about it is that not only does it call upon you to take a breadth of classes, but then to develop the ability to synthesize material from different disciplines. So it's, the British Empire, as you might know, the functionaries that staffed the halls of power in the British Empire, they all studied classics at Oxford and Cambridge. And so the point is that these bureaucrats needed to be able to get empirical data from the real world and then synthesize it in order to make recommendations on decisions for the senior leadership. And so that fundamentally is how most corporations operate still today. There's a certain amount of empirical data that can be acquired, and then there's also a magic that happens when people work in teams, which is that a team can actually produce new knowledge. So not exactly like a PhD researcher creating new knowledge for a PhD dissertation, but that the combination of people working together on a problem a lot of the time can surface insights and observations that can help a company take its decisions to the next level, but that's really abstract. The dealing with a problem, like at a bus agency, in public transportation, do we or do we not let people on board that say that their animal is a service animal? And you get people in a room to hash that question out, and you can bring in perspectives from law, from federal regulation, from the day-to-day perspective of bus operators that are actually driving the buses, the maintenance people that have to clean the buses. And a lot of the time, the decision the group can arrive at is much better than what any one individual might have done, because it's created new knowledge. And so...
it prevents groupthink.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, groups are susceptible to groupthink, but a well-run group will really go to the next level, and it's not just going to be the product of a dominant personality, but it will actually, based on the facts at hand, come to a realistic decision, which is always a shot in the dark, ultimately, when you're making policy decisions. It's a shot in the dark. So this liberal arts education that I got as a high schooler, equipped me to, as a college student, at UC Berkeley, we say, if you're not standing in line, you're in the wrong place. So it's not a small campus. There's 30,000 or more undergrads. There is no shortage of classes to be taken. The challenge is for you as an undergrad to do what you have to do to get the classes you need to graduate in time before they kick you out, which is not a problem for most people, but I was in community college for 4 years full time, so I did have a surplus of units by the time that I transferred. So there is a unit cap. You can't just stay in school forever, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
But so my point is that actually, this might be surprising given my left-wing political leanings, but I definitely thought of myself as an entrepreneur when I was a student, because, okay, I'm trying to get a degree here that's going to equip me for success for the rest of my life, and nobody signs you up for your classes for you. Your advisor will give you advice and help you make sure that you know what you need to do to graduate, but really it's about you, like an entrepreneur, combining the factors of production, you deciding how to build your degree, and what do you want to do with it afterwards. So it's you having initiative to ask for help when you need it, to go to office hours with the professor, to go to tutoring, to, based on a class you had last semester, to sign up for something else that makes sense this semester, that builds on what you've learned before. To make decisions in the face of ambiguity. I've got to meet certain science requirements before I transfer from community college to university. I am going to do astronomy and biological sciences, because that way I know about where I fit in the universe, as well as how does the natural world that I live in work. That was how I made that decision.
Okay. Do you think our education system does a good job at preparing us for the real world and for work?
The system does not do a great job for people that need help. For people that have help, or for people that don't need help, I think it's great. The pathways are there. For first-generation immigrants, it's especially difficult because they don't know. People who were educated, or people whose families were educated in their home country, obviously have much less difficulty with that. But for a student who doesn't know what they want to do with their life, I think a liberal arts degree is great. But so does the system work? I mean, one of my professors said that students in a classroom are much like nursing infants. So apparently there is a wide spectrum of behavior among nursing infants. There are some that latch on and go to sleep. There are some that nurse very actively. There are some that bite the breast. And that is a very good analogy for the different behaviors that teachers often see in the classroom. And maybe you as a professor can actually confirm that's true, that you'll get students that are combative or uncooperative, or students that are highly engaged with the material. There's a whole continuum of that, I think.
Yeah.
So
there is.
The system did a great job for me. That had, I think, if I'm a Dungeons and Dragons character, I have a very high score for the attribute of initiative. And my family was an educated family, so I didn't have that disadvantage working against me. So there was always an expectation that I would go to college, that you have to go to college to get a good job. I would even say that going to college is good just for life. Like, it's not about just the dollars and cents trade-offs. It's not a cost-benefit analysis, but just being an educated person. I think that's valuable. I think that America needs educated citizens for its democracy for however longer we still have it. This is being recorded in October 2024. So, yeah, I think that education is valuable, and it requires people to have initiative. You know, at UC Berkeley, if you're not standing in line, you're in the wrong place, and it's really up to you to get the things that you need in order to graduate. I think at small colleges, they do a better job, so I'm told, of making sure that kids get what they need and they take care of you more. Cal doesn't do that as well. I didn't need it. Probably other personalities need it more than I do.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that college gets a bad rap these days. There's lots of billionaires on Twitter saying that I want to hire motivated high school kids. I think that it's a waste of time to go to college, or it's a waste of money. And no, I don't think so. I think it's convenient for billionaires to have uneducated people that they can train and that don't have critical thinking or argumentation skills to be able to challenge groupthink, and who are going to be more cooperative employees. I think that is very much in their interest. And so this emphasis towards de-skilling, which is widespread in the economy today, and I think that it's not worth it to go to college for certain degrees if it's going to cost you $300,000 of debt. But if our society were to invest in education where people could graduate debt-free with social sciences or humanities degrees, I think this would be a much healthier society. And I think that as a byproduct, the economy and the labor market would benefit tremendously from that.
I agree with that. I think that's the problem, though. I think the problem is that we are seeing less and less that college actually results in you getting that job to be able to pay off that debt. And we know that these really big universities, really, the brand name colleges, they're very expensive to go to. And there's very little it's ROI at the end of the day. And for some people there isn't any because the economy isn't that great and there isn't, that much opportunity to use that degree. And then you have the billionaires on Twitter saying, I'll hire people that are high school, graduates. I agree with you. I think that college is so much more than the major that you major in that leads to a certain job. I think it's an experience, and I'm saddened by, during COVID, everybody was online, and I was teaching during COVID. I was teaching psychology, and I saw the disengagement and the loss of learning that happened during that time. But I think it was loss of learning in terms of the academic piece of it, but also we lost kids, I think, during that time that were going to school. They lost the ability to connect with other people. I think we took a step back in our social skills as well. And it's so much more meaningful at that age than it is at like our age, where we've been to college and we've had these experiences and we know how to reconnect and reintegrate into society. Whereas I think a lot of the kids that went to school during COVID, went to college during COVID, don't have that ability.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Michael, I want to talk about purpose. Where does your sense of purpose come from?
There was a great psychologist called Abraham Maslow who published a theory that's become very influential about what's called the hierarchy of needs. And so everybody, according to this theory, has some baseline needs. So everybody needs food, everybody needs shelter, everybody needs to feel physically safe. That's something that's not currently possible for residents of Gaza and the West Bank in the Middle East. So everybody's got those basic needs at the bottom of the pyramid. And then the pyramid narrows, it gets more specific the higher you go. So the top of the pyramid is this concept of self-actualization. And I'm pretty sure that his concept comes from ancient Greek philosophy, which I took a semester of at Pasadena City College. So all these Greek philosophical texts talk about happiness. Aristotle talks about happiness in the English textbooks. But that book in Greek, that word in Greek is Eudaimonia, which means flourishing. So like an organism flourishes or like a person thrives. That is the word that is translated as happiness in the philosophical text that we read. So self-actualization, from what I dimly remember from the psychology class that I had in high school, was that it's about a person successfully developing their unique individual human strengths and also strengthening whatever individual weaknesses they have, their talents and their weaknesses and so on, and putting them to work in deploying those strengths in the world, in the social world with other people. And what I remember specifically from the Nicomachean Ethics of Aristotle is that happiness, in order to be properly happy, according to his definition, you need to be an engaged citizen of your polis. You need to be active in the processes of your society, in the decision-making and kind of life of your community. So whether it's raising money or volunteering for a youth group or, serving in office in public office in local government or something, those being an active participant in the public life of your community was what he thought was necessary. I don't think that's necessarily true for everybody, but that was true for him, and that resonated with me. So I think that purpose is important. I think it's important for everybody to try to find it, and it's probably going to be different for everybody. But you're going to know it when you see it. It'll resonate with you when you see. I think that people are like stars. One of the things that I learned from my astronomy class is that there's all different kinds of stars, and they all have their different lifespans and their different behavior. And at any moment in the sky, as you look up in the sky, there are stars that are at different points in their lifespans. And so, astronomy has figured out that certain stars are class whatever, and other stars are class whatever. And this star is a certain size and color because it's at a certain stage of its lifespan, and this other star is behaving in a different way, and its behavior has to do with it's a class whatever star. So for me, biography is like astronomy for people. So, Walter Cronkite, Winston Churchill, there's lots of people, and not just dead white men, whose biographies I've studied that have influenced me a lot. And so partly I think that's to inform my judgment as I'm making decisions. Hopefully when I'm making decisions about something, when it's the fog of war, when there's ambiguity, when I have limited information, that I can make my decisions based partly on what I know happened to my parents or what happened to Walter Cronkite. So for me, one of my favorite things to read is the obituary section of The Economist magazine. Sometimes they're people that you've never heard of. Sometimes they're very famous people too. But they're picked because they're really a product of their time or because their life experience is in some way really unique and really interesting. So all these different ways that I can learn about the lives that people have led, I think it's helped me a lot to kind of have a sense of what's really going on in the world. How do other people think? And it's definitely helped me with making judgment calls. How likely is this decision to succeed? If I do this thing that I'm planning on doing, I think as a young person, reading these biographies was really helpful in helping me identify my personal purpose. So to understand that there's different kinds of people, and there's a great movie called SLC Punk about punks in Salt Lake City, and these kids are all like returners from college, and they're all meeting up with their old high school friends. And so at a certain point, as they're going from one party to another party, they meet this guy. I don't remember his name. He's the mod. So he's not a preppy, but he's 1960s mod is his kind of pop subculture. And what was great about that guy is he's like a diplomat. He can move between the tribes. I thought that was really cool and an attribute worth aspiring to. So self-actualization is a super open-ended framework. It can work for anybody. For me, originally, it was about human rights and economic development, Latin America, public policy, and when I graduated from college, I discovered that I wasn't competitive for any of the jobs in that field. And so one of the reasons why I was happy to go to work for the insurance company is because I thought, what I really need is an entry-level position where I can get trained, because I've got a lot of book knowledge, and I can definitely have interesting cocktail party conversations about literature and classical music, but I don't really have anything that'll sell, and I need to be able to afford rent on an apartment somewhere so I can move out of my parents' house. And insurance worked out really well for me. At a certain point, I was also a candidate for the U.S. Foreign Service to be an actual diplomat, and I passed the written exam. I did not pass the oral exam, which was super cool. And I'm actually not mad that I didn't pass, because it was this all-day long exercise. There were multiple stages to it. So basically, I feel like I got a very fair hearing. And it was such a comprehensive evaluation. There's behavioral components to it. So I thought it was really neat to go through the process. The Foreign Service was attractive to me because, that's a career. That is a government job where there will be training. You will be equipped for whatever the job is. And so that was the logic there. Ultimately, the career that I've taken is something that's always built on previous experience. So from my parents' business and the international shipping business, I got into insurance, and one of the things I did was cargo insurance for international freight. And that job came with a construction component, and that's what got me into risk management. And so as an underwriter for an insurance company, you know that your ultimate customers are risk managers. You're selling to brokers. The brokers represent the clients who are, a lot of companies have in-house risk managers, and those are the buyers of insurance. So as an underwriter, it occurred to me like, hey, it would be an even sweeter job if I was the risk manager, so I was the buyer instead of the seller. And so now in every job interview, I always say, I know how the sausage is made. I've been an insurance underwriter. And so from Belectric, the solar company that sent me to Puerto Rico, I then went to a heavy civil construction company. And so, again, based on my construction experience, and then public transportation. And one of the things that was, one of the logics there, besides the fact that I'm actually a nerd and a fan for public transportation, but public works, heavy civil construction was what I had done at the construction company before. And at VTA in San Jose, they were building the BART extension. So I had been on the contractor side, now just moving from the project builder to the project owner side, working for VTA. So I worked on the BART extension project into San Jose. I helped develop the insurance program, an owner-sponsored kind of umbrella insurance program for all contractors involved in the BART construction project, which is going on right now. And we had some major claims at the time that I was there, and so I got some very valuable experience in dealing with major insurance claims. And now I'm at Greenbacker, which is a renewable energy company. And if you've ever been on the 580 freeway outside of Livermore, you see those wind turbines to the east of Livermore. That's one of our projects. We have about 400 of them. And so I buy the insurance, and I am doing business with the insurance broker who has been a client of mine when I was an insurance underwriter. He was my client back in 2008. And then when I was the risk manager for Belectric, he won the RFP fair and square to be my broker at Belectric. So it's always been something that, one thing has led to another, and I can't emphasize this enough. We talk about it a lot in insurance, but I think it's true in probably every business. It's a relationship business. So cynics would say it's not what you know, but who you know. Relationships are valuable. Being able to pick up the phone, knowing you don't have to necessarily know how to get something done, but to know who you need to call in order to get something done is really valuable. And now that I'm more than a decade in the business, like I've got people's numbers. I'm connected to people who can help me, solve problems.
Michael, what do you think contributes to our well-being in our careers?
Well, building relationships is important. So when you're starting out in your career, mentoring is so valuable, which is one of the reasons why I liked Minds Matter so much, because I knew that I had benefited so much from a lot of mentors, and not through any structured programs. There wasn't like a job mentoring thing at any company where I've worked. I've had some great professors who were very generous with their time and office hours, and at my community college, I had a classmate in a French class who was retired, and he was a tremendous mentor of mine. And so what contributes to your well-being in your career? Relationships, whether they're peer relationships or senior relationships, super important. it's really easy for people to feel atomized and isolated in their jobs, and so the relationships is the antidote to that. And there are some, in any field, there's usually professional organizations and charitable organizations connected to the industry. Those, I think, can be rewarding and valuable. I think that it's about, liberal arts in the education world, that word comes from freedom. And so in Europe, they still talk about something called the free professions, which, yeah, we have doctors and lawyers in this country too. But I think in Europe, that term has more currency, where they, if you're a certified accountant or a licensed attorney, you can practice your job anywhere. You don't need to have a lifelong job with one single company, but you can be an independent professional or move from company to company because of the skills that you have. Like a worker having tools, they can go from one cathedral building site in the 1200s to another cathedral building site because of the tools that they have with them. So the liberal arts are about creating free people who have problem solving and critical thinking skills. You can be a citizen in a democracy. And my career has, for me, been about acquiring skills to make me better at my job, not just so I can be a better employee and deliver more value for my employer, but so that I have more freedom of action and the ability to go more places, metaphorically as well as physically. I think the culmination of my career so far has been going to Lloyd's of London, which is the heart of the world's insurance industry. It's a physical building in London where a gigantic amount of insurance capacity is available to be bought and sold. And so to meet my Lloyd's broker, to go to the Lloyd's building, to see the ceremonial kind of gazebo they have inside the skyscraper with the little ship's bell in it that has been rung on ceremonial occasions, that was an extraordinary thing that this current job that I have now made that possible. Yeah. So going places physically as well as metaphorically, by acquiring skills and helping people solve problems. And as a left-wing political person, it's not necessarily, unfortunately, people don't think about going into business. If you're at these lefty campuses, I love the Palestinian scarves that people wear, but I think a lot of those people would look down on me for the fact that I've been happy as a corporate functionary, as a tool in the corporate machine. But it's about solving problems. It's about making goods go where they need to go. It's literally about keeping the lights on in a renewable energy company, delivering juice that makes the grid go. And in order to make these things happen in the real world, problems have to be solved. Like solutions have to be figured out. Knowledge has to be created in order to help the organization survive. And so I've found a tremendous satisfaction in being able to help people and being able to figure out things that people didn't think could be figured out, to do things better and to contribute to tricky situations. There's a lot of satisfaction in the career there. Fortunately, I'm well remunerated for it. That's partly because I have unique skills and it's been hard work. Luck has been a huge part of my career too. I can't stress enough. If mistakes that I had made had panned out differently, or if decisions that I made hadn't turned out as successfully as they did, who knows where I'd be. Yeah. But relationships help, and continuously improving my skills has been a big part of it too.
Relationships, continuously improving your skills, a little bit of luck. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. This was such an informative conversation. It was such a rich conversation. I feel like we covered so much ground, and I thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your expertise with us.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.